The grand banquet hall fell into silence. The female billionaire CEO stood at the podium, speaking fluently in Japanese, but the entire room of executives sat frozen, whispering in confusion. No one understood a word. Not the investors, not the advisors, not even the translator who had been caught off guard. And then, out of nowhere, a young black waitress carrying a tray of glasses suddenly spoke up. Her flawless Japanese filled the air like music, her tone respectful yet powerful. Every head turned, and in that single moment, the entire balance of power in the room shifted. But how did it come to this? Why was the richest woman in the room ignored, dismissed, and left stranded until the voice of someone society overlooked changed everything? Before we dive into what happened that night, the deals, the deceit, the dignity, make sure you're following the channel. We share stories like this every week, stories that remind us the quietest voices often carry the most weight. Because sometimes the people you ignore the most are the ones rewriting the ending. Stay with us. You'll want to hear this one. Let's rewind. Elena Watanabe, a self-made billionaire CEO, had risen from nothing to become one of the most powerful women in the global tech industry. But tonight wasn't about power. It was about respect. She was meeting a table full of Western investors who doubted her, dismissed her culture, and treated her success as luck. And as fate would have it, among the staff serving that night was Amara Lewis, a quiet, young black waitress working 2 jobs to pay for college. Nobody noticed her. Nobody even asked her name. To them, she was invisible. But the night was about to prove that sometimes the person you least expect holds the key to everything. As the dinner began, the wealthy investors laughed loudly, clinking glasses of champagne. Elena sat at the head of the table, elegant yet quiet, waiting for her turn to speak. One man, Mr. Hawthorne, leaned back smugly. Mr. Hawthorne, mocking. "You know, Elena, we respect what you've managed to do, but let's be honest, tech is a man's game. You're here because you're a good face for the brand, but running the company, that's another story." The room chuckled. Elena's expression didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly lifted her glass, her silence sharper than words. And Amara, standing just a few feet away, pouring water, heard every word. Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak up, but she knew her place. Or so she thought. When it was finally time for Elena to present her vision, she stood tall and began speaking in fluent Japanese, her native tongue, her strength, her power. But almost instantly, the investors looked confused. Their translator, embarrassed, stumbled over words, unable to keep up. Whispers filled the room. Investor, what is she saying? Another investor, is she mocking us? Why doesn't she just speak English? The arrogance in the room grew thicker with every passing second. Elena, unshaken, continued her speech. And that's when it happened. From the side of the room, a clear, confident voice spoke in perfect Japanese, translating Elena's words with precision and grace. All eyes turned towards Amara, the waitress. The tray of glasses still in her hands, she stood rooted in place, her voice unwavering. Amara, translating. She says, "Innovation is not about gender. Leadership is not about background. It is about vision, courage, and the will to rise above doubt." Gasps filled the room. Elena paused mid-sentence, her eyes locking with Amara's. For the first time that evening, a small smile curved her lips. The investors, stunned, leaned in as Amara flawlessly continued to translate, carrying Elena's powerful message across the room like fire. The same men who mocked, doubted, and laughed, now sat in silence, their arrogance crumbling with every word. By the end of the speech, the applause was thunderous, not for the investors, but for Elena and for the waitress, who dared to step forward when no one else could. After the dinner, Elena personally walked over to Amara. Elena, softly, "Your voice saved mine tonight. People like you, they don't go unnoticed, not by me." Amara's eyes widened, her hands trembling. She had been invisible her whole life, yet in one evening she became the bridge between silence and respect. But as the two women exchanged a knowing glance, one of the investors, red with embarrassment and fury, whispered under his breath, "Investor, angrily, this isn't over." And it wasn't, because Amara had just stepped into a world far more dangerous and far more powerful than she could ever imagine. A waitress who found her voice, a billionaire who finally found respect, and an arrogant room of men who realized they were never in control. But the question is, what happens when power feels threatened? Do you think those men will let it go quietly, or will they come back harder, seeking revenge? The applause had barely died down when Elena and Amara stepped out of the banquet hall together. But what neither of them knew was that the real battle was only just beginning, because the very men who mocked Elena and underestimated Amara were about to make a dangerous move. One that could ruin reputations, destroy futures, and put both women in the center of a storm they never asked for. In a private lounge after the dinner, the investors huddled together, their faces red with humiliation. Mr. Hawthorne, the loudest of them all, slammed his glass on the table. "She embarrassed us, a waitress correcting us in front of the entire room? And Elena, she planned this. Mark my words, gentlemen, they made fools of us." Another investor sneered. "If word spreads, our reputation is finished. We cannot allow a waitress and a woman CEO to dictate terms to us." The men nodded grimly, already plotting revenge. Back at her small apartment, Amara could hardly sleep. The events of the night replayed in her mind, the laughter, the arrogance, the power of her own voice finally breaking through. The next morning, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Ms. Lewis, this is Elena Watanabe. Meet me at my office, noon." Amara's heart skipped. She had never been called into the office of a billionaire before. Nervous but determined, she showed up, still in her modest clothes. When Elena saw her, she smiled warmly. "You're more than a waitress, Amara. You're educated, articulate, and courageous. I want you to work with me." Amara's jaw dropped. This wasn't just gratitude, this was opportunity. But as Amara's world began to open, the investors launched their plan. Whispers spread in the media. The billionaire CEO can't even speak to investors properly. She relies on staff to save her speeches. Is Elena Watanabe really capable of running her empire? And Amara wasn't spared either. Online trolls surfaced, questioning her background, mocking her race, calling her an attention seeker. The young woman who had finally found her voice was now being silenced with lies. One afternoon, as Amara arrived at Elena's office, she found none other than Mr. Hawthorne waiting there. His smile was thin, but his words were sharp. "You're ambitious, aren't you? Don't get too comfortable. Elena won't be around forever, and when she's gone, what happens to you? Think carefully before you tether yourself to sinking ships." Amar's hands trembled, but before she could respond, Elena appeared. Elena, firm. "Mr. Hawthorne, I didn't realize parasites had business hours. Leave, now." Hawthorne's face twisted with rage. "Mr. Hawthorne, this isn't over." And he stormed out, leaving behind a chill in the room. Later that evening, Elena sat with Amara in her office, overlooking the glittering skyline. Elena softly, "Power doesn't corrupt, it exposes. These men were always this way. You simply gave them a reason to show it. But here's the truth, Amara. When people fear losing control, they'll do anything to keep it, even destroy you. Amara listened, her eyes wide. She realized this wasn't just about a speech. It was about something far bigger. She had stepped into a world of money, power, and ego. And now, she couldn't step back out. Just when Amara began to believe she could handle the storm, an envelope arrived at her apartment door. No name, no return address, just a single photo inside. It was her, Amara, serving tables, laughing with friends, completely unaware the picture had even been taken. On the back, in bold letters, "Stay silent or regret it." Her hands shook. The room seemed to close in on her. This wasn't just a whisper campaign anymore. It was personal. A waitress who found her voice, now targeted for daring to speak. A CEO who refuses to bow, but whose enemies grow bolder by the day. And a shadowy threat that proves this fight is only just beginning. But the question is, what will Amara do now? Stay silent to protect herself, or rise again, even if it costs her everything? While Amara wrestled with the threatening message, Elena faced a new battlefield. In the boardroom, the investors convened an emergency meeting, without her knowledge. Their goal? To strip Elena of her position. Mr. Hawthorne, smirking, "She's reckless. She's dragging us down. It's time for new leadership." The votes began, and Elena's empire trembled. At the same time, Amara sat on her bed, staring at the photo and its chilling words. Fear gnawed at her. If she stayed quiet, maybe the attacks would stop. But if she spoke, if she stood with Elena, she might lose everything she had left. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Text. "Choose wisely. Elena isn't worth your ruin." That evening, Amara stormed into Elena's office. Amara, shaking voice, "Why me? Why drag me into this? They're coming after me now. Maybe Hawthorne's right. Maybe you're a sinking ship." Elena, calm but fierce, "You think they're after you because of me? No, they're after you because you dared to challenge them. That terrifies them more than me." The words struck deep, but did Amara believe them? The next morning, headlines exploded. A confidential file had been leaked. Elena accused of financial misconduct. Investors circled like vultures. And then came the twist. An anonymous source claimed Amara was the leak. Her face, her name, splashed across every news site. Amara's world crumbled overnight. Betrayed, framed, and hunted by the very people she had tried to stand against. And as she sat alone, the envelope appeared again, this time with a single note inside. "You're deeper than you realize. Next move is yours." And that is where we leave part 3. A young woman branded a traitor, a billionaire CEO one step from ruin, and enemies who play in shadows, always one step ahead. The question now is, can Amara clear her name, save Elena, and survive the storm? Or is she already lost to the game? They thought they had destroyed her. They thought Amara would hide, broken, while Elena's empire burned to ashes. But what they didn't know was that these two women had something money and power could never buy. They had truth. They had courage. And when joined together, they had a force no one could silence. The night after the headlines exploded, Amara sat in her apartment with the curtains drawn. Her name was everywhere. Traitor, attention seeker, the waitress who brought down a billionaire. She felt the weight of the world pressing on her chest. For the first time since this began, she thought about quitting, about disappearing. Her phone buzzed. Elena. Amara almost ignored it. But then, she remembered Elena's words. Power doesn't corrupt, it exposes. She answered. Elena's voice was steady, calm, yet burning with fire. Amara, listen to me. They want us broken. That's how they win. But if we stand together, if we fight with truth, they can't touch us. Not really. Amara's throat tightened. She had never seen anyone stand so tall in the face of so much hate. And for the first time in her life, she realized fear didn't have to win. That night, Amara made her choice. She would not run. She would fight. The next morning, Amara walked into Elena's skyscraper office, tired, shaken, but determined. Elena was already at work, her desk piled with files, her computer glowing with documents. Elena, smiling faintly, "I was waiting for you. Are you ready to turn the tables?" Together, they began piecing the puzzle. Amara handed over the anonymous messages, the photos slipped under her door, every whisper that had been hurled at her online. Elena's team traced the origins. Step by step, the trail led back to one man, Mr. Hawthorne, the man who had humiliated Amara at the banquet, who had called her unworthy, the man who couldn't stand the sight of a woman, let alone two women, challenging his power. But they didn't just find Hawthorne's hand in the smear campaign. They uncovered bank transfers to journalists, payments to online trolls, and even recordings of his late-night rants. And worst of all, those rants dripped with racism. The mask was off, and the truth was uglier than anyone could have imagined. The stage was set. It was the company's biggest press conference of the year, a moment meant to showcase strength. But Hawthorne and his allies planned to use it to destroy Elena once and for all. They arrived smug, confident, already tasting victory. But what they didn't expect was Amara, standing at Elena's side. Elena stepped up to the podium, her voice calm, her eyes sharp. "They called me reckless. They called her unworthy. But what they didn't count on was the truth." The screens behind them flickered to life. Bank transfers, signed documents, secret recordings, Hawthorne's voice dripping with contempt. "She's just a waitress. And Elena, she's a fool for letting her speak. No one will follow women like them." Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters leaned forward like wolves scenting blood. Amara stepped forward, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. "They tried to silence me. They tried to bury Elena. But silence only feeds corruption. And today, we are done being silent." The crowd erupted. Questions flew, reporters demanded answers, and for the first time, Hawthorne looked afraid. The fallout was instant. Investors scrambled to distance themselves. Stocks plummeted, not Elena's, but Hawthorne's. Partnerships dissolved overnight. And the very men who had laughed at Amara, who had mocked Elena, now sat pale-faced as the world turned on them. Mr. Hawthorne tried to speak, tried to spin the story, but the recordings drowned him out. His racism, his lies, his corruption exposed for all to see. The hunter had become the hunted. And Elena? She stood taller than ever, unbroken. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Amara, once just a waitress, was hailed as a voice of courage. She wasn't a side note in Elena's story anymore. She was the story. Young women, minorities, anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong saw themselves in her. And Elena proved what true leadership looks like. Not power over others, but power with others. Together, they hadn't just won. They had rewritten the rules. And maybe, my friends, that's the lesson here. When arrogance and prejudice join hands, they look unstoppable. But when truth and courage stand together, no empire, no reputation, no lie is strong enough to last. Elena and Amara's victory wasn't just theirs. It was for every person underestimated, mocked, or told to stay in their place. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can give an underdog is a voice. And when that voice finally speaks, the world has no choice but to listen.